Lord Sedwell, perhaps I could start with you. Could you just paint us a picture of the broad set of threats that you think the UK confronts today, and maybe give us a sense about some of the things that you worry about most?
Well, thank you very much. An important topic, Mr. Chairman. I think we have to think about economic security in the context of the wider question of economic resilience, which is essentially the ability of the economy to withstand and recover from a whole range of potential disruption. But economic security I see very much in terms of threats, as you framed the question, essentially a deliberate attempt to disrupt the UK economy. That could come in different ways. There are obviously there's a sort of direct threats, so cyber attacks on critical national infrastructure. I think the things that I worry about slightly more in that context would be something that is simply harder to respond to. We can defend critical national infrastructure, at least the governmental part of it. It's not straightforward, but at least it is defensible. But for example, a combined cyber and information sort of propaganda attack designed to disrupt essential supplies, create panic buying, affect public order. There's that kind of thing as well, which a sort of hybrid attack of that kind, which is extremely challenging to defend against and prepare. And then we have indirect questions of economic security, so foreign hostile ownership of important parts of the economy, which the national security investment regime is designed to tackle, potential disruption to critical supply chains, either deliberate if they're controlled by a foreign government. China, as you know, has a near monopoly on the refining and production of critical raw materials. They've just invested in it, but they have that near monopoly, so they could leverage that. Or we could see disruption to supply chains from friendly countries. Either, and we saw some of this during the pandemic, by friendly countries actually, as everyone essentially panicked over their own access to critical medical supplies. But we could, for example, we're dependent on Taiwan for the highest end semiconductors. So there could be an attempt to disrupt the supply from a friendly country, Taiwan, of those into the UK economy as well. So there's a whole range of potential threats out there. There'll be others I've missed, but I think we have to think of direct threats, indirect threats, and some of the complexity of a modern economy that could be disrupted.
Yeah, and you're underlining there the point about our capacity to respond to them.
Yes.
And therefore the risks, the threats that we perhaps should be most worried about are perhaps where we have more limited capacity to respond.
Exactly. So we should, as in any national security threat, we really this was sort of touched on the 2010 and 2015 strategic defence and security reviews, but you reread those, and the economic pillar of those was much more about opportunity. They talked about prosperity and promoting that rather than about economic security. We started thinking much harder about economic security with the 2018 National Security Capability Review and then the two integrated reviews. It is, of course, part of the framework of the SDR and I guess of the new national security strategy. And you're right, we have to think about how do we defend ourselves against these potential threats, direct and indirect, complex to do. How do we recover, respond, because, of course, that's part of defence. If we can recover quickly, then the potency of the threat is less. And also, how do we deter them?
Catherine Royle, I know you're speaking in a personal capacity to us today. Thank you very much indeed for joining us to give evidence. What's your perspective on this question about the threats that our country confronts, in particular when it comes to economic security?
Thank you. I mean, I think I would absolutely agree with everything that Mark said. I mean, because I sit in a NATO context, I start from there, where obviously you're looking at the military threat as well. But really, even NATO has had to realise that even if we manage to do what we're all working so hard to do and build up our conventional capability and keep our nuclear deterrence and so forth strong, we actually need to think about the attacks that are happening now. And they are precisely the ones that Mark was talking about, the cyber attacks, the disinformation. And I would go a bit further than that. I'd go subversion, so funding of political parties to influence elections, disinformation, espionage, energy, sabotage. I mean, frankly, our adversaries are looking for any sign of weakness in our institutions and where they think it's going to be difficult for us to respond, and they're attacking us on a pretty regular basis on that. And of course, it's not just the sort of state actors that we all, I mean, especially in NATO, tend to focus on Russia when we think about all of this. But it's also organised crime as well, who are part of it. And I think one of the problems we've got at the moment is attribution, where I mean, we've come a long way since, for example, when Litvinenko was attacked, and we all found it incredibly difficult to accept that that was an attack on our sovereign territory against somebody living in Britain. We've all done that, but we've almost swung the other way now, and we sort of assume that anything that happens is going to be Russia and a state actor. But that may not be true. And when we look at things like critical underwater infrastructure, which has been one of the things that NATO has been thinking about quite hard with the problems that we've seen with cables in the Baltic Sea, we're not quite sure whether it was an attack or whether it was incompetence. And it's almost impossible to tell. And I think that's one of our problems. I do think that one of the things we could do even more of to address the point that Mark made about our ability to defend ourselves is to do even more to educate our publics. I don't think that our publics really understand the level of threat that comes against all of us all the time. I think with attacks like we've seen on Marks and Spencers, for example, and issues such as the British Steel example, people are now beginning to wake up to the fact that actually there are vulnerabilities around. But I also think they don't necessarily understand that even the foundations of our democracy are under that sort of attack. So I mentioned, for example, the foreign funding into political parties, which has happened right across NATO, and is something that means that the very foundations that we're on are not as solid as we thought. Ownership, foreign ownership, Mark mentioned as well. I would also add foreign ownership of the media. I mean, we are at risk of letting malign actors into very sensitive parts of our society and our economy.